Let's get it out of the way right now. Not a lot of people enjoy these killers. Very few people like the Knight. Very few people like the Skull Merchant. And even fewer still like both of these killers. People generally don't like the Knight because his add-ons are whack, the chapter around him wasn't necessarily great, and his power is, if we're being honest, much more in line with what the Legion should have been than what we would expect from a medieval knight. I still think he's neat, but that's neither here nor there. Skull Merchant had many of the same problems, but worse. Not only was the chapter around her not great, but she was also the latest in a long line of blatant thirst traps, and she had the misfortune of following the Knight. You may not like either killer, but at least the Knight can say he did the whole 3-gen or bust, 3-gen extraordinaire thing first. The point being that whether you love or hate these characters, it's fair to say that most of the community dislikes them. I mean, it's the first time in DBD's history that they've had back-to-back chapters with mostly negative ratings on Steam. So it's safe to say that people are upset. Okay, but why? Because, okay, sure, the chapters aren't necessarily groundbreaking, but their poor reception would likely surprise you if you also knew that A Binding of Kin, All Kill, and even A Nightmare on Elm Street all got mixed reviews on Steam, not mostly negative. So what gives? Well, the problem is actually fairly easy to suss out. Forged in Fog came with some quality perks, a map with the potential to be great after some touch-ups, and a killer that definitely fits the rule of cool from an aesthetic standpoint. And Tools of Torment, it released with 2 well-received survivors, a long-awaited update to Shelter Woods, and a sexy killer guaranteed to contribute towards this community's insatiable thirst. So, there are the positives, but the issue, as you likely already know, is that while the Knight and Merchant seem different at first blush, they emphasize the same issue in a big way, the issue of 3-gens. Now, just for the sake of transparency, let's define what a 3-gen is, just so if there's anyone in the audience who doesn't know, we're all on the same page. Okay, so a 3-gen, from my perspective, is a collection of unfinished generators kept in close proximity so that a killer can more easily protect them without having to cross the map. In these situations, a killer will oftentimes prioritize protecting the generators more than chasing an injured survivor. The gens are the priority. As far as strategies go, this one makes sense on paper, and in practice, it turns out both Knight and Merchant are pretty good at protecting 3-gens. Knight can keep spawning guards to damage gens and chase off survivors, while Merchant can literally just put drones over the last gens and wait for one to alert her of a survivor's presence. A survivor who, if they stay too long, will be exposed and will easily go down. Even as a guy who generally likes the Knight, I can agree that these strategies are as unfun to play against as they are effective. I remember a game on Haddonfield against a 3-genning Knight where he literally protected his 3-gen for over 40 minutes. And it was in that moment that I finally said, yeah, okay, I get why people hate this dude. I understand the controversy. And look, let's not pretend like those two are the only killers capable of holding down a solid 3-gen. Nurse, Spirit, Blight, Artist, Wesker, these are just some of the many killers who can hunker down and bring the fun to a grinding halt. And so I hope now it's kind of obvious why people responded so poorly to the Knight and the Merchant. Because 3-genning isn't fun, and their whole thing, the thing they do better than anything else, is 3-genning. Now, one quick caveat, I know sometimes people are going to say, oh, I play these characters and I don't play them like that, and that's awesome. I love that. That's really, really cool. Good for you. However, that's not really the debate here. The debate is not can you play them differently, it's how effective are they at this one strategy, and are there going to be a lot of people who use this strategy, which, of course, yes, they're very good at this strategy, and yes, plenty of people are going to use them for this strategy. So, if you're one of the Chads who plays the Skull Merchant or the Knight, and you don't use them just to 3-gen your enemies into oblivion, that's awesome. I love you for it, but please, let's not change the debate here. Let's not move the goalposts. And now, if you'll allow me, I'd like to explain why, despite how much people seem to dislike these characters, they kind of did us a massive favor. And I'm not being sarcastic with that, I'm serious. They did us a real solid. 3-gens have been a part of Dead by Daylight for a long time, essentially ever since people started taking the game more seriously and looking for reliable strategies. And while it wasn't exactly overnight, I'd say it's undeniable that 3-genning has grown steadily in popularity over the years. In time, 3-gens became a lot like slugging and camping. It was a viable strategy that killers knew would upset survivors. But where it became a problem, I feel, is that 3 gens are far less healthy for the game than those other 2 strategies. Which, I realize, some of you are listening and you're like, what? Slugging and camping healthy for the game? So hear me out on this. Sometimes slugging and camping, they're just the right moves to make. A killer sometimes really is better off camping. So take the in-game collapse, right? You get a survivor down, they have 1 or 2 teammates left, whatever. Okay, where are you supposed to go? Timbuktu? Kalamazoo? What are you supposed to do? No, face camp them. Hope their teammates get a little too altruistic and you can be rewarded for that. I understand why people don't like that, but that is objectively the right call in that situation. Do not leave the hook. As for slugging is probably maybe even less popular. I mean, it's even more hated, but sometimes the survivors are playing so aggressively that it is just the proper response. Now, I'm not talking about the people who slug and bleed out entire teams just because they can. I'm not talking about that. Again, guys, good faith. Don't assume I'm defending the worst of the worst. I'm just talking about there are times where camping and slugging are not just viable, but they're the right call, and you shouldn't feel bad at all about doing them, because it's the right call. But actively 3-genning, see, that's interesting to me, because while you could argue that it may be strategically viable, which it is, it also essentially guarantees that you're going to make sure neither side is having any fun, which raises the question of why a person would do that in a video game where ideally everybody's there to have fun. At the end of the day, winning conditions are vague and undefined in Dead by Daylight, but I'm going to stand my ground and say that anytime a game goes for over 30 minutes, everybody involved lost. It doesn't matter who killed whom or who survived, y'all just spent 30 plus minutes of the only life you're ever gonna get, the one life you get! And you just spent over 30 minutes of it playing in this one game you weren't even having fun with. That's a decisive L. That's a loss for everybody. Thankfully, the developers seem to agree with me too, so that's nice. In the upcoming mid-chapter, the devs worked hard to reduce the frequency of 3-gens. They nerfed Call of Brine, Overcharge, and Pain Resonance, 3 perks heavily associated with the 3-gen strategy. They also reworked the merchant somewhat so that she could possibly feel better about chasing more frequently and not having to rely on 3-genning every game. They also nerfed healing and medkits, possibly so that survivors will be more likely to work on gens while injured and focus on the objective. I don't know, but I would imagine that's at least part of the rationale there. And in short, they delivered a massive blow to the 3-gen strategy. And while it's not going to die here, it definitely felt that one. All of these changes, mind you, come from the fact that the devs heard everyone's complaints about how long the games were taking, and now they are actively trying to defang this oppressive and unfun strategy. So, you may not like the Knight, and you may not like the Merchant, but it's possible that their awful receptions will lead to profoundly healthy changes to the DBD meta. That may never make them beloved chapters, or even good chapters for that matter, but there's little denying that they've left their marks on DBD, and for the time being, it actually seems like those marks are generally positive. So what I'm basically saying is, from the perspective of the much maligned Knight and Skull Merchant, you're welcome.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my